Good morning, everyone. Britt Simon here. I thought I'd jump online, take some questions. If people have got some questions they'd like me to answer, I'd be more than happy to help out with that. I'm hoping that you all saw the visa bulletin this week. Obviously, no forward momentum with that, but I did produce a video that explains some of the reasons why we shouldn't be panicking. We don't necessarily know all of the reasons when they decide not to increase the visa bulletin number, but we can look at previous years and we can use a little bit of common sense to look at the data and see whether they're really getting behind. And I don't think they're getting very behind. I think probably embassy capacity is as much of a problem as anything else. But we'll see that data in about 2 weeks' time, on January the 1st. We'll get the SEAC data for the first time for DV 2025, and so then that's what we really need. Okay, Adam, what do you mean you're finished? You finished what? What did you finish, Adam? Let me know. Let's see. Is there no EDV for 26? Yeah, there is a DV. Diversity visa lottery for 2026. The entry period was in October, and that's DV26. There'll be another entry period in October of next year, 25, which will be DV27. So yeah, it's still going. Nothing's changed. Hello, Simon. What are the risks of transferring to another embassy while you are processed and current? Firstly, KCC won't help with that sort of transfer, right? When you're processed and current, they move you into a status called AV. It's the AV status. And if there's a queue of people at your embassy, then you'll be in the AV queue, the queue of people in AV status at your particular embassy. It's by embassy. So when you email KCC and ask them to unlock your case, for example, to make any changes, they won't unlock at that point. When you're in AV status, KCC won't unlock. So in some cases, they might move your case, depending on where you come from and your situation and what you tell them. They might move your case to another embassy, but in general, they don't want to. And so that's kind of one of the risks, that they just won't move it. So you should really take action before you become current or before you're processed. Which is why it's very unwise to listen to this bullshit about unlocking causing delays. Not unlocking can mean people get locked into embassies where they shouldn't get locked into. So, you need to just use some common sense and listen to people that know what they're talking about. So, rather than others. What do I think about the next visa bulletin? There will be a next visa bulletin. We'll have to wait and see what that says. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they will increase the numbers next VB, but I don't know exactly what they'll do. Watch my video from the other day that I posted the other day to show how we see normal progression throughout the year, and that there are much more interviews performed from February, March, April, May onwards than there are in October, November, December, right? October, November, December are quiet times every single year. It happens every year. And every year people panic. And every year I tell them not to panic. So it's a normal thing. My case number is 5K. Post is ACRA. Please, do I have a chance? I don't think so. Firstly, when you give your case number, you've got to give a region. But I'm going to assume that, that your region is AF. I don't think ACRA are performing well at the moment. I think they're still going slow. So even though your case number is very, very low, you are somewhat at risk even at ACRA. Now, they got up to cases with 10,000 number last year because they did very little throughout the year. They did 20 or 30 interviews for every month in the year. And then ACRA suddenly took, I think it was about 70 interviews for the final month. And that got them to a 10,000 number. So, you might be okay. But what it means is if you chose to stay there, then you're waiting for that process to happen, and you'll be delayed throughout the year, and it could be delayed until summer of next year. By that time, who knows what will have happened? So a smarter thing to do would have been to have moved your case earlier, but you chose not to do that. And so now you have to just wait for ECRA and hope that they will take your case. That's pretty much all you can do. Waguti says he's watching from Uganda. That's good to hear it. Got my 2NL KGL on 2nd of February. What should I do now? Well, get ready for your interview. So how do you get ready for your interview? That's probably the question. First thing is you need to book the medical. So, and you find out where to book the medical by reading the instructions. You have to go over the instructions. You have to read the instructions. When you go to the instructions, you'll see there are 3 sets of instructions you need to be familiar with. The first is the general instructions that tells you the rough sort of flow, how you will process your case and that sort of thing, high-level information. The second set of instructions you need to read is the reciprocity page, because you need to find out how to get police certificates from any countries that you might need to provide police certificates from, right? And there's other documents you may need to provide. And so you read the reciprocity pages to do with the countries where you've been in the past. That's why you go there, or the country that you're in now. And you also read the embassy-specific instructions, where it will tell you things like which doctors you can see to book your medical. So between now and your interview, you're expected to book and take your medical, get all your documents together, which you understand which documents you need to provide by reading the instructions, and making sure you've got documents like police certificates that, again, you find out how you obtain them by reading the instructions. So read the instructions is the first thing, and book your medical as soon as possible, okay? But heard that the Trump administration going to end EDV soon. Yeah, so Trump talks a lot of things, but just because Trump says something doesn't mean that Trump can achieve that or do that. He didn't do it before. He said he was going to end the DV lottery in 2017, and he didn't. Not because he didn't want to. He probably wanted to, but he doesn't have that power. So, what Trump wants and what Trump gets, not necessarily the same thing. He's not a king. He's just a president, right? Or he will be a president. He's not even a president right now. Right now, he's just a pain in everyone's ass. Adam says, my visa process is finished. Okay. Thanks for your help and motivational words. I'm coming on Thursday. Awesome. Wow. So quick. Good luck with the traveling. Hope your traveling goes well. Shitty weather in California right now. So I hope you're not coming here because it's horrible. It's raining. I don't know. I pay too much tax to be paying, to be dealing with rain. Yazan, you're very welcome. Very welcome. Thanks for saying thank you. Jeriatu says, I have a case number of AF 2000, interview scheduled for January, Sierra Leone Embassy. Good. Get ready. Get all your stuff together. Kryptonite. Is any problem, Britt? My sponsor changed his address within the same state. No problem. Should I unlock the DS260 to update the address or any other option? Okay. Be clear that a sponsor, a financial sponsor, is not necessarily the same as a host address or an address where you might want to receive the green card, right? So if what you're saying is not your sponsor, but someone where you plan to stay with this person, or you at least want the green card to be sent there, if that address has changed, then yes, obviously at your interview, you need to update the address to make sure the green card and the social security number are sent to that address, right? The new address of this person that you're calling the sponsor. But when you call this person a sponsor, I don't know if you're confusing that term or whether you really understand the difference. I don't know. So a sponsor is to do with financial sponsorship. There is no technical sponsor with a DV lottery. You are actually technically self-sponsored for the process. But you might have a friend or a family member or whoever that has given you their address, which is where the green card will be sent, or perhaps where you'll be staying, which we sometimes call a host. So be clear and specific on what you mean. Okay. Blessed to bless. An active follower of this channel. My family and I are in Texas, thanks to Simon's direction. Just here to encourage you all to follow his advice. I love the way you throw in the y'all there, like a real Texan Good for you. Thanks for saying thank you, and for the recommendation to others. Congrats and good luck there in Texas. I was just thinking about Texas this morning. I've just spent an amount of money on building a gazebo in my backyard, covered gazebo, and the money I've spent on that thing, because I live in an expensive area, is enough to buy a house in Texas. That same amount of money, I could have built or bought a very nice house in Texas for that same amount of money, and all I've done is built a little gazebo. Still, I'm looking forward to using it. I'll do a video out there at some point when the weather's decent, and who knows? Maybe we'll have a party in my backyard sometime. Wethith, strange name. Hi Simon, how are you? Is there any hope for AS 28,000 from Sri Lanka for DV 2025? It is a high number. There's no doubt about that, right? In DV 2024, Asia numbers went to 27,500, but that was where the highest case number was about 40 or 44,000, the highest case number that had been selected, right? Right now, the best evidence that we have suggests from the survey that we did that AS numbers end at something in the early 30s, that they don't go as high as they went last year in DV 2024. That could be wrong, and we're going to find out that data for a fact on January the 1st, right? Which is only, 2 and a bit weeks away. But let's say just for argument's sake, that in DV24, 27,500 was the max case number made current out of 44,000. You would be in trouble if your case number is 28,000 and the max case number that was selected is only, let's say, 35,000. If the number is reduced by 10,000 numbers, let's say, different to DV24, and your case number is higher than it went in DV24, and DV24 was, frankly, it was exceptionally high, it shouldn't have gone that high, right? Then yes, common sense tells us that you're somewhat at risk. Now, that risk will change depending on what happens next with the Trump presidency. Let's say Trump comes in and is pissed off that the Iranian government was trying to assassinate him. I wouldn't blame Trump for thinking that way, right? And we're already treating Iranian applicants differently. They go through a different standard of background screening because they're from Iran, and Iran's government is anti-American. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Trump implements some sort of controls or additional screening, or even a travel ban or whatever, particularly targeting Iran, right? As well as other Muslim majority countries, but probably Iran, right? There is significant risk that Iran is going to have some sort of detrimental conditions placed on it because of what Iran's government did towards Trump. That wasn't okay. I mean, as much as I dislike Trump, I don't want anyone to assassinate him, and I certainly don't want a foreign government like Iran, trying to assassinate any of our citizens or political leaders or whatever, even political leaders that are complete idiots, right? Iran needs to understand its pathetic position within the world's order. It is not a powerful country, and when it behaves like a powerful country and tries to do things that is, anti-American, etc., you're going to incur the wrath of one of the world's most powerful countries, and the man that we've just put in charge of this country is a vindictive, spiteful little man, right? What do you think he's going to do? So quick digression. So let's say he blocks. So back to your question, Wethith. Let's say he blocked Iran, right? What does that do? If let's say 1,000 to 2,000 Iranians are taken out of the process for DV lottery, then that will increase the visa bulletin number that the Asian continent goes up to, because the rest of Asia, non-Nepal, non-Iran cases, will be able to go further and take more of the quota. If he takes no action against Iran, then all we have, that will block Iranians is the normal background checking that goes on today anyway, which can take sort of 4 or 5 months of background checking. And that's why they don't get as many issued visas as they probably should be entitled to. It's the length of time for the processing. So depending on what Trump does, it may have a negative or negative effect on Iranians. And if it has a negative effect on Iranians, it would have a positive effect on Sri Lankans. That's basically the reality, right? So that's the answer to your question. The same thing could happen, by the way, in Africa and to some extent in Europe, and possibly South America, but very unlikely South America. But same sort of effect could happen if Trump implements some of the controls that he had in place when he left office, such as the travel ban. It could affect the way that the DV lottery goes, right? So anyway, you'll have to wait and see what happens. But I explained it a couple of different ways for you. Hopefully that was helpful. Marinara Adisa, thank you for informing. You are sharing. I'm DV winner, DV25 AF43XX Nairobi. Went for the interview. Unfortunately, my names were not incorrect. Was given a yellow to correct it and then send. Okay. You got to prepare well for interviews. So I don't quite know what you meant about your names weren't correct, but your documentation needs to be very good. Otherwise, they form an opinion, a suspicion that you are committing some sort of fraud. If you can't provide good documentation, accurate documentation, legitimate documentation, then you're going to have problems. And so I hope you can sort that out, because this is too big a deal to mess around. Philip, my man, how are you? Philip, a question because I forgot. Do they process DS-260 in numeric order or in order they are submitted? So this has been a debate that has raged for a long time, Philip. For the longest time, there are a couple of bits of evidence that we know of, right? In various court documents, etc., they have talked about the process of how they process DS-260s. And it is clear, it is obvious that they open DS-260s for the first time at least in the order received, right? Because some cases with even a high case number can go through the process of DS-260 processing quite fast, right? And sometimes that happens and it just doesn't the case number doesn't seem to be affected. However, this year particularly, DS-260 processing seems a little bit slower to me. And the KCC organization went through a change of leadership about a year ago now, almost a year ago, I think it was. And it wouldn't surprise me if they've modified the process somewhat, right? So it doesn't make sense that it can be only by case number. That doesn't make any sense at all, because they don't actually even know the case number until they open the DS-260. But what they could be doing is they could be opening the DS-260, they could be routing or organizing that workload and moving those cases into sort of piles, if you like, if you want to think about it as electronic piles, and perhaps then ordering somewhat in a case number order, right? That's possible. It's a possible change. I don't know for a fact that it's happening, but I'm open-minded to that being the case. Now, we know, though, that there is still an advantage of early submission in terms of getting that case open to start with. And there is certainly an advantage to the very early case numbers. But once there's a backlog, then things could change. Now, the debate has raged for a long time, and one of the things that I've said for many years about this is I will truly believe that that KCC have switched to a case number processing when we see evidence like this, what I'm about to say. If we know that cases submitted in May, June, July tend to have an advantage. Like if it's very common that someone says, okay, I submitted my case in October, it's now December, I'm still waiting. And the most obvious thing we would say is, well, you submitted late. And they say, well, yeah, but I've got a low case number. Okay, that's interesting. So what if you submitted late, but you've got a low case number? Do we hear many cases where people say, I submitted 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and we know that we've got a backlog of cases being processed because there are tons of people waiting. And then this person says, yeah, I submitted 4 weeks ago, but because my case number is low, I found my case has been processed already. We don't find that sort of example. That doesn't happen, right? And so, and I've asked, and apart from, what's his name? The guy that always likes to bring up stupid facts. What's his name? Well, I've forgotten his name. He's in the channels all the time. Ronnie. Apart from Ronnie, who seems to always remember some bizarre thing and then can't prove it and comes up with just irrelevant bullshit. Apart from Ronnie, nobody ever really has brought any real evidence where they say, yeah, I submitted 4 weeks ago. We know that there is a backlog of DS260 processing, but that case was processed in 5 minutes flat. It doesn't happen. We don't get those sort of cases. And that should be happening if we want to say that cases are only processed in case number order. So there's more to it than we truly 100% understand. There is some advantage of early submission, and there is some advantage of case number. But there isn't 100% advantage of either direction, and certainly there isn't 100% certainty that low case numbers will have rapid processing because of their low case numbers. That literally never happens. We don't get that evidence, right? Just never happens. The other thing that sort of troubles people or confuses people is just the fact that DS260 processing is not a set number of days for every single case, and everybody follows the same path. As you well know, Philip, I think your case is about 29,000 or something. So you're not really suffering in any way because of the delay in your case, but you submitted early in your case, Philip. But is your case being delayed because they're putting your case on the back burner because of your case number, or is it being delayed because there's some sort of background checking process on people with your technology background or your travel history or whatever it is that they're looking into, and you don't know. You don't know what that is, that causes one case to be slow and the next case to be relatively fast. But yeah, so I'm not prepared to say that it can only be this way or it can only be that way. I think that's just the wrong way of thinking about it. I do get frustrated with people that say, that then relate it to the visa bulletin. They say things like, cases have been processed to 25,000 in Africa, therefore 25,000 will go current in the next VB. Those people are typically misunderstanding the process of the VB and frankly the whole thing. But anyway, that's another subject. Anyway, Philip, I hope that was a complete enough answer for you. Let me know if you've got questions. Okay, Igmoon. Does withdrawing some countries from the American lottery for the year 2026 increase the number of winners from participating countries? I don't think there are big changes. I think maybe one country was withdrawn from the American lottery on 2026. There are countries that are constantly kept out of the lottery, more or less constantly. They are big immigration centers, countries like India, China, the UK normally, Nigeria now has been, those countries are excluded. The reason those countries are excluded, these big countries or countries with a large number of immigrants, is that the rules of the DV lottery say that they have to take a 5-year period looking at a certain type of family-based or work-based immigration mainly, and they take a 5-year period and add up all of the immigrants that came from that country over a 5-year period. And if that number goes above 50,000, then that country is considered to be well enough represented and therefore does not need to be in the diversity visa lottery, right? When you take a country out of the lottery, you take that country out of the lottery for its population and its potential to be issued cases. So, and some countries underrepresent themselves in terms of the number of entries. So let's say UK is gonna probably be taken back out of the lottery in a year or maybe 2 years. Right now, you're eligible in the UK to enter the lottery, or you were in the DV 2026 and DV 2025, right? That was the first time that had been that way for a long time, and it's because that immigrants from that country dipped below 50,000 over a 5-year rolling window, right? So what happens when the UK then will be taken back out of the lottery eligibility in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whenever that happens, right? There are 65 million inhabitants of the UK. That 65 million will be taken out of the calculation that is the European population. And so that will reduce the number of the number of visas available through the quota for Europe by taking that out, right? So if a country such as the UK has low number of entries, it gets a low number of selectees, although we don't know how many selectees it got in DV 2025 because the government's a bunch of morons. But let's say it has a low number of selectees because it had a low number of entries. That's the only reason why. But it has a pretty big population, 65 million. It's a fairly large population within Europe as a whole. It's much bigger than some countries, right? And so it will change the whole calculation, both the number of selectees and the number of visas available for that region, right? So it's a double-edged sword. You have to think of it both ways, and it depends whether this country is a big user of the DV lottery or not. So let's say, for example, and this isn't going to happen as far as I know anyway, I haven't checked the numbers, but let's say Uzbekistan, population of Uzbekistan, right? Uzbekistan, what is that? Where's my thing? Okay, so Uzbekistan only has a population of 36 million, but it has a massive number of entries in the lottery every year, and typically gets 3,000 or 4,000 selectees minimum, right? I think this last couple of years got more selectees than that. It gets that number of selectees because it gets a lot of entries. No other reason. It's got the same or less, actually, a chance of selection in Uzbekistan as every other country in Europe. Same as France, same as Germany, same as England, right? In fact, it's got less, but I don't want to confuse people too much, but Uzbekistan actually has a lower chance of selection, but still gets a lot of selectees. That's simply because they have a lot of entries. That's the only reason. But if you took Uzbekistan out, you'd only be taking 36 million people out of the population count, right? And you would then be taking a lot of selectees or a lot of entries out of the situation, and every other country in Europe would see the population of Europe diminish slightly, which would slightly reduce the available number of visas for the quota. But because they're such heavy users of the system, there would be a lot more visas to go around for other countries. That's, it's a double-edged sword, right? So it depends on the nature of the country to answer that question properly or completely. Okay, I'm hoping that others, apart from just Iggy Moon, found that interesting. But there you go, we'll see. Okay, let me see if I can speed up and do some of these questions quicker for you. Hello, Sam. Is there a chance? Sam? Who's Sam? I'm not Sam, I'm Simon. Is the chance for the case number to increase this year for Africa since there were additional 3.5k additional selected people from Africa compared to DV24? That's, I'm sorry, that's your understanding is the opposite of correct. It's just not the way it works. Firstly, the quota for Africa is largely as similar as it was in previous years, right? So if they increase the number of winners for the same number of selectees, having an increased number of winners is not a good thing. It means it's going to be harder for that region to meet its its potential, right? There's still the same number of visas available for Africa, even though there are more selectees. So no, it's not a good thing. Additionally, there are about 3,000 visas available less across the whole world in DV 2026 DV 2025 as compared to DV 2024. The reason is because of a program they started that supports special category immigrants. But basically, some of the 55,000 available visas, which is the global quota, some of those have already been taken out of the global quota. And in return, or in the same way rather, the quota for each region has therefore been reduced a bit, right? So in DV 2025, there are less visas available for Africa than there were in DV 2024, and there are more winners, right? More selectees. That's worse, not better. It's the opposite of your understanding, right? Why is the visa bulletin not increasing? Okay, I posted a video 2 or 3 days ago. Go watch that video. I've explained everything that I think I needed to explain. I don't want to go into that since I've just posted that video. Hello, Simon. I've filled and submitted my DS260 form already, but I haven't heard anything since then. Is there something I need to do before I hear from them? I'm from Ghana. Okay, everybody who's a regular listener of this channel will know that the last 3 words said everything. I'm from Ghana, right? So you're from Ghana. Accra Embassy is not behaving properly, and depending on your case number, you either have a very low chance of getting an interview because Accra Embassy is mucking around, being lazy, not doing its job, or you have no chance of getting an interview because Accra is being lazy, not doing its job, etc. So it would be helpful if you would tell me your case number, because if you're in that latter category where you've got no chance, and that probably means if your case number is above, let's say just anything above 10,000, you're definitely at risk. Anything above 5,000, you're probably at risk. So what's your case number? If your case number is significantly higher than that, then you have absolutely no chance of getting an interview at Accra, because Accra are going to continue to muck around. And then you have to try and figure out ways of moving your case. And you have to do that before you become current. If you leave it until you're current, you're going to be losing your chance, and you won't understand why. So please do let me know what case number you have. My passport, I've done through DHL as requested. Now I will wait for how long? I don't know. Time varies for how quickly they post the passports. Simon Gracie says, Simon, I have questions. Did they announce the winner of DV26 in May, or they will shut it down? No, they won't shut it down. They will announce the winners of DV 2026 in May. DV 2026 will go ahead. I've explained this before, but Trump can't come in and just change the laws, right? He can make life difficult for us, but he can't change the laws overnight. That's literally not possible in this country. And so he might, or the government and the administration and the House of Congress might try and change some laws, but those things take time, take cooperation, take leadership. And none of that will happen overnight, even if they tried to make that happen. So there'll be plenty of advance warning, and probably whichever year's lottery is actively in process at that time will probably be allowed to continue and finish. So DV 2026 definitely will go ahead. I suspect DV 27 will go ahead, and I suspect we're going to be the same for many years to come, frankly. So there you go. Rabbit from TikTok. If you and your spouse each live in a different country, can you interview separately, or do you have to interview together? How does it work? It's a good question. KCC only arrange one interview. They arrange the interview for the primary applicant, and they assume that the other applicants are going to go to interview with you. your derivatives, your spouse, your children, and that sort of thing. In some situations, that may not be possible, right? And so then you have to actually sort of think, what is the best way? Technically, it is possible for you to have an interview and then later arrange another interview for your derivatives, your spouse, your children, or whatever, in another country. But that has to happen after your interview, and it has to happen before the end of the program. So you are taking on significant risk and complication because you have to arrange that second interview. KCC won't do it for you, and it can go badly wrong. Therefore, it is usually better for the principal applicant to bring the family to that first interview, or if that's not possible, for the principal applicant to change their interview location to be with the family, and all interview at the same time. That is the safest, simplest way to do it. All be together in the interview. If you want to do other things, if you want to take a second interview, that's possible, technically possible, but it's dangerous. And I don't recommend it unless there is absolutely no other way of doing it. Okay. Tara says, mine is OC 1900. How is Suva performing and do I have a chance? Suva for the last 2 or 3 years has been brilliant, been no problem at all. And so, at Suva, that's not, haven't got a problem there. Your case number is on the cusp of where I calculated the risk begins. Now, if Trump bans a lot of people in the lottery in general, there will be more visas to go around, particularly if he impacts Africa. There would be more visas to go around, and Oceania could eat from the plate of Africa. That's basically how I put it. It could take some of those overflow visas. It did that in DV 2024, but I've used DV 2024 numbers and more or less assumed that Oceania will benefit from that sort of impact anyway. I've more or less assumed that in my predictions, in my calculations, where I've said OC 1900 or so is about the risky point, right? OC 2000, 2100 are possible, but a higher level of risk, right? And so, we could see, a problem for you, not because of Suva, but because of your case number. Okay, so we won't really know for a while, right? It's going to take us a while before we know that. Is London a good embassy? Yep, of course it is. It's British. It's a good embassy. Is it DB 14th, 2024 or 2025 QA? Oh, did I put 24? Oh, I did. Yeah, no, you're right. We're not a year behind the times. I'll change that later. Sorry about that. Thanks for your guidance. I'm Indiana Hammond. No, hang on. I got the date right. What are you talking about? It's 2024. Yeah. Hello, sir. Thanks very much for the guidance. I'm in Indiana Hammond. Oh, Hammond, Indiana, I guess. I got myself a job at Walmart supermarket as an online order shopper. Oh, awesome. DV24 winner, Accra, Ghana. My gosh, one of the few Accra cases to go through. They didn't get very many. So what's an online order shopper for other people that, coming to the country? This is one of the sort of the typical jobs that, particularly an immigrant can get pretty easily. So people are sitting at home ordering stuff from Walmart, and they want to drive to the Walmart location, which is a supermarket in America, and they want to pull up outside and have someone bring out the bags and put it in their trunk of their car and drive off, right? It's a service that is provided, right? It's a service industry thing within the retail organization. It started during the COVID times. It was a way of avoiding having people going into stores. And people have found it convenient. My own wife has our groceries delivered to the house, right? So I think it's kind of nuts, but anyway, we place orders online for groceries and they're delivered to the house. So, Americans are lazy and we will pay people to do services for us, right? So I have a guy that cuts my lawn and does my gardening. I have another guy that looks after my pool. I have a cleaner come in the house and all these sort of things, right? We are lazy, and that laziness is a good thing if you can take advantage of it. Now, I'm sure that our friend Araba from Accra probably doesn't want to be an online order shopper for the rest of his life, But for now, that's a good job, right? To start off, and you can begin to build a life on that if you're smart with money. You can begin to build a life with that, and then you look for a second job or a better job, and you get somewhere in life. So it's a good way to start. Nobody should be at all proud about the work they do. It's good, honest work, and good for you for taking it and finding that job. Good for you, man. So I hope I'm assuming correctly your agenda there. Fatumata Jello says, "Hello, Brit. How is Dakar Embassy? Are they sending 2NLs? AF 59804 Dakar Embassy. Right. Your case number is high enough to not be at risk, but high enough that you can wait until we've got some data before you start worrying about whether Dakar Embassy are doing well or not, right? In about 2 weeks' time, on January the 1st, our wonderful friend Zarthisius and probably Philip, who asked a question earlier, will start to download data from the SEAC website, and we will know a lot more. We'll know which embassies have taken cases and have issued visas and that sort of thing. We'll know the highest case numbers in each region. We'll have a lot more data. So with your number at 59,000, you just don't need to worry about Dakar performance right now, because it's going to be months before your case number is current anyway. And you'll have plenty of time to see the data and make a decision as to whether you need to move your case or not, right? So relax, chill out, and wait until we've got some real data rather than the rumor, which is all we've got right now. Abel Bet says, "Thanks for the information. Myers to ask from Nairobi Embassy. I wrote to the embassy. I was replied that my case number is current, 15XX. I'm waiting G6 for my 2NL. Waiting G6 for my 2NL. Okay. It's important to understand that when you're going through this process, before you're scheduled at an embassy, the embassy doesn't know a damn thing about your case. They know nothing about your case. So, writing to Nairobi when you haven't been scheduled there yet, it's kind of pointless. They don't know anything about your case. And so all they can say is you're current. But that doesn't mean anything about your case. Only KCC will know about your case until KCC transfer the case to the embassy, which is when they schedule you for interview. Okay. Any luck 2NL for case number AF42K? Yeah, probably. What option do we have if we do not win the DV? If you don't win the DV, you can enter again the next year. That's what I would suggest you do. If you want to look at other immigration methods, I don't know so much about those immigration methods, so I'm somewhat au fait with immigration methods such as work visas and family-based and so on. But immigration to the USA is not easy. It's just not. It's not something that everybody can achieve, and which is why the DV lottery program is so special, because it gives an opportunity to some people who have no other way of getting here. So look into other options for yourself and study what advantage you might have. Do you have work experience that's important, work that could be done in the USA, and they're looking for that? Are you highly qualified? Do you have family members who might be able to sponsor you? Those sort of things. Rabbit Tribe, very popular question on TikTok. What happens to people who applied with the same email address for their respective entry, mum, husband, son? No problem with that. It's absolutely fine. Britt, should I unlock DS260 to update for my travel? Currently in India for studies. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you asked about Dakar earlier, right? So it is too early to make those sort of decisions. Just wait until you see the data, okay? Satoshi, how much would a winner need to settle in the USA? Oh, okay. It varies. The amount of money that you need to come here varies. It depends on your perspective in life. If you're coming from, let's say, Ethiopia, where people might earn $3,000 or $4,000 a year, you're not going to have very much money to come here to America. And so you're probably going to need to very humbly find someone to host you and help you find work and that sort of thing to actually get started in America, right? That position is going to be very different to, let's say, someone from Western Europe who might have 40, 50, $100,000 in the bank, and they come with that money. It can be very, very different. So you will cut your cloth according to your needs, right? That's just you will. It's not that you have to have a set amount of money. You have to have the ability to earn money, the attitude to earn money, etc., and then pick and choose carefully where you go, and understand also that where you go has a big, major difference in how much it costs to live there. So there are, area around me, the average wages around me, I think, is probably 150,000 a year. Let's say for minimum income. I think the official number for low income in my area is 117,000 a year, right? 117,000 in Alabama is an unheard of high salary, right? So not all the places are the same, but don't, for God's sake, go and live in Alabama. There's just no reason to do that. I don't care what you say. There's not a good reason to go live in Alabama. Just don't do it. And that same rule applies to several states in America. There's just no good reason to go there. But there are some good places that are kind of in between, right? Where the cost of living isn't ridiculously high, but you can find, jobs and places to live and everything else, and actually sort of get on the ladder. There are different places in the country that are still nice places to live, and you have to choose carefully. So choose carefully where you go. Understand that some cheap places are cheap because there's no jobs there, and because everyone there is poor. You don't go to the poorest part of Alabama or Louisiana and then try and make a fortune. It's not going to happen because nobody there is making a fortune, right? Because they're awful places to live. On the other hand, if you go to a high expense area, you'll find your salary will be higher, but it's still going to be pretty painful to get on the property ladder, pretty painful to pay for rent and that sort of thing, because the numbers are going to be higher as well as the wages being higher. So you have to sort of balance things out carefully. Okay. But you can't come here with nothing. You've got to have a plan, right? This is not a good country for people who want the government to look after them. It's just not a good country for that. That's not the way this country really works. There are some safety nets out there, but in general, it's not a welfare state. It's not that sort of a place. You have to come here with an intention to work, and you have to find your own way. And if you do that, you'll do well. Arno, hello, Simon. I'm from Armenia. My case number is 30K. When will I have an interview invitation? Probably quite late in the year, right? 30,000 in Europe is probably at least 3/4 of the way through the numbers. So you should probably not expect an interview until, I don't know, June, July, August, somewhere around about that time. We'll have to wait and see how the numbers go. Abel says, the above information. Wanted to ask, when will they schedule my interview? What are the requirements for my host? No requirements for the host. There is no formal requirement placed on a person that is hosting. Okay. Alice, can one take their interview in another country and the medicals in the home country? Generally not. There are some exceptions to that at the moment. There are several countries whose applicants have been told to go and interview in another country. Frankfurt is an example of that. There are several countries where the interviews are happening in Frankfurt, but they've allowed for the medical to take place in the home country in those cases. Generally speaking, though, the medical is normally, unless there's some sort of exception like that, the medical is normally only performed by the panel physician that the embassy has appointed. So you can read the embassy specific instructions, and it will tell you where you're allowed to have the medical. It can't just be any doctor you choose. It's a doctor they know and trust to do the process. Okay. Do I really have to mention my relatives who live in the US in the interview? It's up to you. You don't have to mention those relatives, but just think about the person on the other side of the desk who has the ability to change your life, right? Wouldn't you rather be honest with that person and say, hey, I've got my brother-in-law, he lives there, I've got friends there. Doesn't that seem like they're going to be more willing to give you the visa if they think you've got someone there to help you? Just a little bit of common sense would say do that, right? There are professions called bright prospects professions, sort of, on ONET database they talk about bright outlook. With these professions qualify for a visa? Thanks. If you're talking about the qualification for DV lottery, the work experience for a DV lottery has to be in a job of a certain level. It's a profession or job or a role that takes 2 years of experience or training to perform that job, right? So these are supervisory jobs, managerial jobs, perhaps technical professional jobs, those sorts of roles. They're not things like taxi driver, right? Although a UK taxi driver, frankly, is pretty well trained, but they're not sort of very basic level jobs. They're not someone who is working in the warehouse, the Amazon warehouse packing things, right? That's not the sort of job that will get you approved for work experience requirement for DV lottery. Okay. If you do a job though that has a bright outlook, then it's an encouraging sign to the consular officer that maybe you'll be able to survive well. But so qualifying through work experience may not be what you're asking about. You may actually just be talking about, does that, is it good to have a plan to go do a profession or a job that has bright outlook, but you meet the education requirement. Okay, so if you meet the education requirement, then you're not looking to qualify through your work experience. And then, yes, having a job that has a bright outlook will probably make the CEO feel a little bit better, right, about giving you a visa, right? That's probably how it works, okay? Strong tar. What's the average processing time for DS260s, and what happens when you unlock and resubmit the DS260? Does it get processed anew, or just the sections with modifications? So there is no average processing time. I would tell you that at some times of the year, usually by about February or March, all the DS260s should be processed. And a DS260 processed, let's say in March, will probably go through the processing with almost no backlog, if any backlog at all. And that's when we actually see the typical processing time. And that's where people experience a turnaround time of maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So if you submit your DS260 in March, it might take 3 weeks to process your DS260. Whereas if you submit it in October, it may take 4 or 5 months to get your DS260 processed. That doesn't mean that it takes 4 or 5 months to process the DS260. It means that someone submitting in October is going into a backlog situation. Whereas the case submitted in March probably doesn't have any backlog, right? That's the first bit of the answer. When you unlock and resubmit, in general, it doesn't cause any reassessment of your case, but it depends what you put in there. If you're resubmitting because you just got married to a spouse, right, and your spouse is, let's say, an Iranian male, then yeah, that's gonna add some processing time, right? Use some common sense. If you're adding an adult derivative, although that would be a bit weird, why are you adding a child? Why are you adding a derivative at that point? I mean, hopefully you mentioned that person before, but let's say you have a 17 or an 18-year-old child that you had previously not planned to take with you, so you hadn't submitted a DS260. But now you unlock and you submit a DS260 for that child. That could add a little bit of time to your case, right? But things like you change an address because you realize you made a mistake on an address of a place where you lived 15 years ago, or a job, the address of a job you performed 15 years ago. Those things don't take any time at all. They don't have any reprocessing need for that, right? So, so in general, I prefer to say DS260 does not cause any delay, but there are some cases where it will cause delay, and you should be happy that it causes delay, because you would rather be delayed than denied, right? So if you have a serious correction to make in your DS260 where you realized you left off significant information, then unlock the bloody thing and get it corrected and get your background check done with the correct information, so that you're not delayed after the interview, or even denied because your background check wasn't performed correctly, right? So in all cases, I always say you're better off to unlock your DS260. There are certain times when I stop saying that, and certain scenarios for certain cases where I stop saying that because timing is tight and embassy capacity is limited and that sort of thing. So I tend to there are some times where I'll say to someone, look, if you'd have asked me 6 months ago, I'd have said unlock, but now I'm saying don't unlock, right? But in general, unlocking is normally the right thing to do. Okay. Karen says, please, I mistakenly changed the day and month I was employed on the DS260 form. Any advice? Who cares? So, you put you were employed from the 5th of February 2009 to March 28th, 2014 for some job. Who cares if you got that right, whether it's February the 5th or February the 15th? Nobody cares. It's not important. It's not an important thing, right? So don't unlock and make any change for that on the DS260. It's just not an important thing, right? Why my comment, delete it from live broadcasting? Don't know. This comment wasn't deleted. Britt, it is your job or you do something else? I do something else. This is not my job. This is just a hobby. I'm in software. I'm a software engineer. Essentially, I'm actually an architect, software architect. That's what I do for a living, and this is just a hobby. Can I contact the American Embassy in Ghana? Can someone intervene with regards to 2NL's case number AF7K? You can contact the American Embassy in Ghana and they will just ignore you, or tell you, they're getting there or whatever. It won't cause any positive effect. We've been trying for years to get them to behave, right? So by all means, write to them if you feel you want to, but it won't do anything. Can you tell the approximate time period between the 2NL and the actual interview? It's typically about 6 to 8 weeks, roughly. And what I mean by that, you could get a 2NL now, here in December, for a February interview, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be some set number of days. So it could be the 2nd of February, it could be the 22nd of February, any time in that period. So it's a rough a rough estimate, 6 to 8 weeks, roughly speaking. But it could be a little bit less, a little bit more. And 2NLs for February will go out as late as, February is a bit weird because of Christmas and New Year. But we could, in theory, see 2NLs going out as early as the beginning of January for February interviews. Very rare that we see that in January, obviously, but in a typical month, there are sometimes 2NLs that are sent on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of the month, and it's from the previous month, right? It's really finishing off the 2NLs from the previous month. So that happens. But there's always a gap, right? There's always a gap. And again, there are other strange things like in, I think it was in DV 2022 or 23, we saw 2NLs being sent out in late September for September interviews. Some people were given notice periods of like 2-3 days. And many people weren't able to get themselves organized, but they were trying to sort of do something special, so they sent those interviews with very short notice, and some people were able to use that short notice, and others weren't. Right? But that's not really a normal situation. That's an unusual situation. Okay. Kingston says, "I'm new to your show. I'm a bit confused about the lower and high case number for DV lottery. Can you please briefly explain it to me. Okay, in each region, every selectee has a case number, which is called by the government a rank number. And your rank is the lower number goes first, in theory. So case number Africa number 1, right? And there could be an EU number 1 and an Asia number 1. But Africa number 1 is the highest number, the first in line, rather, highest rank, or the lowest number. And so therefore that's going to go first. Case numbers will continue up to 100,000 or so, bit more than that for Africa. And so someone with a 95,000 case number is right at the bottom of a list with 100,000 case numbers in front of them. But there are not 100,000 cases in front of them. There would be, roughly speaking, there are case numbers between 1 and 100,000 for Africa. And there's probably only about 30,000 cases, right? So 70,000 of those numbers are what we call holes, right? There is no case. There's no actual winner in that case number. So case number 11, let's say, might be a hole, right? And that was because that entry was numbered as case number 11, was the 11th case in the region, but their photo was bad. And so they were kicked out of the process, or they were a duplicate entry or a fraudulent entry. So they were kicked out of the process before the announcement of the results, right? And so then they are holes, and there are many holes. And in Africa, we're going to see about 70,000 holes, right? So it's a rank number. It's a positional thing. Case number 1 is entitled to their interview theoretically before case number 10, but in practice, it doesn't go in very strict order. It's just generally speaking, if you're a lower case number, you will be interviewed earlier in the year. If you're a higher case number, you'll be interviewed later in the year, generally speaking. And that's kind of how it works, right? Hope that helps, Kingston. Rebecca Martha says, my photo is I used for applying for DV26. My shirt was white because because they refused uniforms and white was the only casual shirt I had. Will I be disqualified? Oh, dear me. I have to stop in a minute because of my voice. No, you won't necessarily be disqualified. It is true that having a white shirt against a white background is not a great idea. But it depends on the standard of the photographer. They can make you stand out from the background. So if you have no obvious shoulders because your photo was taken badly and you're wearing a white shirt, then yeah, that can cause a problem, right? But if it's clear, if you clearly have a body that is supporting your head, and the photo shows your shoulders and that sort of thing, and allows the composition of the photo to be understood by a computer system, then you should be okay. Okay. Sir, can you please use your outfit to intervene for us? Again, we've tried in the past. We have tried with lawyers and all sorts of things, but they're entitled to organize it the way they want. Okay, Satoshi again. I applied this year for DV26, stating that I have a high school diploma, but I haven't received it yet. However, by the time the results come out, June 15, I'll have it. Did I mess up? No, that's absolutely fine. That question in the DV lottery entry that asks you to pick your education standard is not important at all. It's only there to collect data about what types of people are entering the lottery. It's not a disqualification question at all. Okay. Does taking the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine without the second dose, will that lead to a problem? Because I'm planning to take it in the coming week. Any word of advice or suggestion? It'll be up to the physician in your country to decide whether you need both doses or not. It's rare that they ask for that, to be honest. So it depends on the vaccine you get, or even whether there is. Some of them are a single shot now, so it depends which vaccine you get. Don't worry about it. The physician will sort it out. And if you need a second dose, then it's pretty easy to just get a second dose. You can get that a few weeks later. Not a problem, right? Can Dar es Salaam embassy reach 10K as they've only sent February 2 and I was up to 1K this time? Again, we don't have the data, so we don't know for a fact. You're basing your question on rumor, not fact. In about 2 weeks' time, we'll see the SEAC data and we'll have the exact fact. We'll know exactly what case they got to. Okay, so I'd rather talk about these sort of questions when we have data in front of us. So in about 2 weeks' time, we'll have that. Okay, let me just look for. I'm going to scroll down and miss a few questions. Do you think they will include UK again next year? Probably will. It was sort of borderline 50,000. It dipped below because of the COVID years, and there were two sort of years which were affected by the COVID years. That's what made the UK come back into the formula. And so those 2 years have got to sort of average out of the 5-year period. And when that happens, then the UK will be ineligible for the lottery again. So I suspect we'll probably see them in for another year, maybe another 2 years, and then they'll be gone. So make hay while the sun shines. Okay. Joe says he's enjoying the cold. No, thank you. How are you, Simon? Is there hope of high chance to select in Africa? Is there hope of high chance to select in Africa? The chance of selection in Africa is about 1 in 100 years. It's not really a plan. It's a lottery. That's all it is, right? What type of interviews they ask at the interview? How long is the interview itself? Great question. I like these sort of questions. That shows that you're thinking ahead, Satoshi. The interviews are normally quite quick. They're normally less than 5 minutes, right? It's simply approving your documents, that you've got all the right documents, you've planned ahead, and they ask you 1 or 2 questions, which are pretty irrelevant questions typically, and then, boom, you're approved, right? It's really that quick. Some people experience slightly longer interviews. 5 to 10 minutes would be, in my opinion, a long interview period. Wouldn't normally take that long. Very, very rarely I hear about interviews that took longer, where they're delving into someone's background. They want to know, when did you guys get married? What, how did you meet? They're trying to establish if relationships are real. But that's rare. If you want to know exactly what sort of questions are asked, Google the words Brit Simon interview experience stories. Okay, those 4 words. Brit Simon, the first word. Interview experience stories. I've got a web page where people have been adding their stories, their accounts of their interviews for about the last 10 years. So you can go back and read some of those, and you'll see they're all very, very similar. They all, list out, they're asked 2 or 3 questions. Very rare you see anything unusual there. They're all very, very similar, no matter which embassy you're talking about. Okay. How's Nairobi performing this year? We don't know. There is suspicion that they've had a slow start, but that's not really a problem for Nairobi. They've got a big amount of capacity. They can very quickly catch up. And they've shown in the past, and last year, for example, they showed that they were determined to catch up, and they absolutely did that. So we don't have the data right now. We have to wait and see the data. But I'm hoping it will be a pretty good year for Nairobi again. Addis, by the way, seems to be performing better. There are rumors, only rumors. That's all I've got to go on. That they've taken cases up to about 18K. If that's true, that's a good positive sign for Addis. I'd love to see that. Addis is an important embassy. If it does well, that's good for Africa, right? But if you have Addis and Cairo and Nairobi, if you have those powerhouse embassies performing well, then you're not going to see current for Africa, because they'll give away a lot of visas early with those big performing embassies. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Cairo is another one that I want to see doing well. Nairobi, obviously. Addis, less important. I just wish Accra would pull their finger out and work properly. But yeah, just one of those things. Okay. We applied Greencard but not selected. What is problem with computer system selected lottery Greencard? It's a 1 in 100 chance, right? Apart from Oceania region, which has a much better chance, it's just a lottery. Like, you wouldn't complain if you bought a lottery ticket to win $1 million and you didn't win the $1 million. You wouldn't say, "Oh, there must be a problem with the computer system. I didn't win." You would instantly understand it's a lottery. So why don't you understand the DV lottery is also a lottery? It's not a guaranteed way of getting a green card. It's just a chance, right? You may be selected, you may not. Okay. Okay, let's just see. Always a pleasure to join your sessions. Thank you greatly. How do draws 2026 go through once or more than once, as you did mention that it begins in December through May? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. No, so what I've explained about the draw process, and this is for people who've entered DV 2026, the draw process is initially just a numbering of all the cases, right? There are, let's say there's going to be 5 million entries in Africa. They number all of the entries between 1 and 5 million. Every case, every entry gets a number. And then they throw away 4.9 million of them, and they focus on the top 100,000 cases, right? Roughly speaking. And they go through those cases between December and May, and the top 100,000, and they programmatically check their photos, and they make sure their photos have never been on any of the other entries. They check them against the 4.9 million other entries they've got. They're looking for duplicate entries, and they use facial recognition software to check those entries against other entries to make sure that there are no duplicates. They use databases of information to check that the entries are legitimate, no fraud, no double entries, that sort of thing. And there is a series of processes they go through between December and May to filter out the majority of those winners. So as I mentioned before, there would be 100,000 people who are numbered correctly, but 70,000 of those 100,000 get knocked out. And so, what's left is 30,000 people, 30,000 cases, and each case has a selectee and any derivatives. So a spouse or children will be on that main case, right? Which is why we have 30,000 cases, and that would be about 50,000 people, selectees, right? So when we see the number for Africa is 50,000 selectees, what that means is that's including derivatives, children, spouses, and the main selectees. And actually, those 50,000 people are on about 30,000 cases, with case numbers between 1 and 100,000, right? That's how it all works. So it's not that there are multiple draws as such. It's that there are multiple steps in a process that goes through until May that weeds out bad entries, and whoever is then announced as a winner has got through that process, okay? That screening process. Okay, quick scan, make sure there's nothing. Last question here, because I know something about it. Thanks for I call you. Appreciate you 2026. Is it possible to have dual citizenship with UK and US? Yep, I could pull out my US and UK passports right now. I have that. When you apply for American citizenship, which is not what the DV lottery gives you, the DV lottery gives you a green card, right? And once you've been living in America for 5 years with the green card, then you can apply for naturalization, which gets you an American passport, right? So an American citizenship. So at that point, you don't have to give up your UK citizenship, and therefore you become a dual citizen. There are some countries where their rules say that if you apply for American citizenship, you have to give up their citizenship, right? It depends on the two countries, it depends on their rules. But America generally doesn't ask you to give up any other countries' citizenship, as far as I know. Although there may be some sort of differences to that, but in general, America is okay with dual citizenship. So the question is, does your own country allow that? And the UK does. Okay. All right. That will be my last question today. I hope that was useful to you. Hope it was interesting. If you have any questions that I haven't answered that you need to have answered, ask those questions at brettsimonsays.com. Okay. And I answer all the questions there myself personally. Please give me a thumbs up for this video. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. All right, everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye.